Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Joe and Kyle here, coming at you for another PTSF. And today we have a lot to talk about. Before we dig in, let's talk about navigating psychedelics a little bit. So we're over halfway filled for our March groups. Really excited about that. I expect we'll sell out in a week or two longer. Should be amazing. Got some really cool people that are going to be in there and just super stoked. So it's a CE approved class through, what is it called? The Center for Spiritual Competency?
Spiritual Competency Resource Center. I always
There it is.
mix
By Dr.
mix
David
it up.
Lukoff, who's an interesting character in his own right. And our CEs work for nurses, therapists, psychologists, and hopefully we can get it together and expand that to cover more professions as well. But, check out our page to see if it'll work for your particular license. Yeah. And Kyle, can you talk a little bit about the student class we have coming up?
Yeah, so this one starts on Tuesday. It will run on Tuesdays. It's a 5-week online class on March 2nd and starts at 7 p.m. Eastern time, I believe. And this one is for students or anybody that's just psychedelically curious, want to know how to get involved a little bit more, want to know, and maybe you're curious about how to navigate research and getting involved in the academics, or just trying to figure out like a new path. So we get a lot of inquiries from students and just people that are interested in our clinician course that, aren't clinicians, therapists, coaches, or working with people. They're just starting off. So we figured we offer this one for people that are just, starting off and want to get their foot in the door. So you can check that out, psychedeliceducationcenter.com.
Yeah. We've got a really cool ketamine event coming up on, I think, is it the 12th or is it the 14th?
The 22nd of February.
There you go.
February 22nd.
And that one's going to be really cool. Melanie Pincus teaches at Columbia. I think she got trained at Emory. Neuropharmacology, or what? Do you remember her background?
Something like that, yeah. Neuroscience.
It's all on the page. And you can find that. Is that, that's not on our
Melanie.
Teachable. It's on our Shopify site, right? psychedelicstodayshop.com. Yeah. And we'll have a link in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll add it on the online link if you go to Psychedelics Today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Under online events, right?
Yeah. We'll link it up there.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. CE approved, and that'll be great. And yeah, I think this comes out Friday. So Friday afternoon, evening, we'll have a live stream panel with the producer of Light Years. So if you hear this podcast, rent the movie, watch it. You can come to that live stream for free. It's going to be fun. Me, the director, producer, writer, actor in the movie. He plays a lot of characters. That'll be a fun one. And so just lots of stuff coming up. So stay tuned for more. It's going to be a cool ride over the next few months for us. Maybe even a bicycle day event. I'm working on it. I don't know what I can really announce yet because nothing's really formalized. But I'm working on something and I'm hoping it'll play out. All right, let's dig in. So
cool.
Vice Motherboard put out this article very recently about Compass Pathways filing a patent. The headline was a little inflammatory, right? So saying they're going to patent soft furniture and holding hands in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, which to those two things alone, you're like, wait, what? Like that makes no sense. Like, how does that work? But I think we have to dig a little bit behind the scenes to understand what a patent is first versus a trademark and why they use them. And Kyle, you had a great question earlier. What's a patent versus a trademark?
Yeah.
So I pulled this up on findlaw.com. There are 3 distinct types of IP. There's patents, trademarks, and copyrights, which are often confused. So patents prevent others from making or selling an invention, but trademarks protect the words, phrases, symbols, logos, or other quote-unquote devices used to identify the source of goods or services from competitors. So one's about the actual technology, one's more about the identity. So you just kind of write a Gucci logo on a white T-shirt, that could be trademark infringement.
Right, our logo trademark.
Right, and you have to actually have a trademark in specific categories, right? So ours is protected under a specific category, but if someone wanted to make a Psychedelics Today car company, they could probably do that. Please don't do that. and, it'd be really inconvenient for us. Yeah. So patents, it's kind of like an invention, right? So they file these paperworks, and a lot of these companies just file for the sake of filing to see what the patent office will say.
Right.
This is a strategy to allegedly build more value in your company by holding IP, patents, etc. And my guess is they don't expect that soft furniture and hand holding is going to come back. The Motherboard Vice article states that a big issue at the patent office, USPTO, is that sometimes it's really hard for the patent clerks to dig in to see, oh, this was actually happening in the 50s and 60s quite extensively. So this is not a novel new invention. It's kind of like a way to bamboozle them a little bit for your advantage. And if you look at like a Samsung versus Apple thing, they're just constantly suing each other. This is a big thing with big companies. They just have a gazillion patents. They probably step on each other at times, and they're just always in court spending gazillions of dollars. But if you look at their value in the stock market, I guess both Apple and Samsung feel like it's worth it. So they're going to keep doing it, unfortunately. And, the Vice article actually covers like a lot of things. It's not just hand holding and soft furniture. So I don't know, like, what are your initial impressions there, Kyle?
When I first, came across this article, I think everybody was sharing it yesterday and today. I just kind of laughed at it. It was like, them trying to patent soft furniture and what is in here. The method where the room is decorated using muted colors, and a room comprises of high resolution sound system. A room, compromises a bed or a couch. Like, these are just so general and vague. And then the hand-holding thing, it's just like, what are they really doing here? And I guess, I asked that question, what's the difference between a trademark and like this patent? When I think about therapies and kind of different techniques, so like holotropic breath work, that's a trademark, right? And you have to go through a GTT training to get trained in this specific type of technique. And I think that can be important for trying to preserve the integrity of the technique and what that kind of lineage is. You're thinking about different somatic techniques. I mean, somatic experiencing, Hakomi, I think those are all trademarked, right? And I think to be able, if you're going to create something novel like that, I think having a trademark on that is, can be important for kind of keeping the containership. So, people don't just go running around saying like, I'm Hakomi trained or I'm holotropic breathwork trained, when they don't have like any sort of training in that specific type of training, right? They didn't train with the group. They didn't train with anything. But to try to put a patent on maybe like the room and how that's done just seems kind of funky to me. I don't really understand it very much. And, I guess I could see it from their perspective, just trying to grab every little bit and piece of this budding industry and trying to like claim their stake here. And, I guess that boosts up like the valuation of their company and saying like, we have this, and I just think about like, MAPS, like they have their specific training for MDMA assisted psychotherapy, right? And they took a lot, right, from previous, previous research and what was going on. And, it sounds like people are going to have to go through that training, at least for a few years. I forget like what they said, like 7 to 10 years that they have exclusivity rights over it. Maybe that's
how long patents usually operate. Different industries kind of go for longer or shorter. But yeah, generally about 7 to 9 years or something like that.
Maybe that's changed. I'm not really too sure. I remember that's what I heard a few years ago. But I don't know. I mean, for MAPS to kind of have people go through their training program to make sure that people are delivering like a high standard of training like that, I think is important. But again, they didn't they're not patenting.
Highly different.
It's a different
from
approach.
what Compass did here. And yeah, like this is one of the things we fear about the psychedelic world. Are these companies going to try to say, nope, you can't do this in a commercial environment without paying us licensing fees? Or you just can't do it. Like they don't have to grant you a license because it's, allegedly their property according to the government. So that could really, if these patent officers aren't educated appropriately or resources aren't made readily available for them, then, MindMed, Compass, et cetera, they're going to be doing some crazy stuff like this. And I don't, it's tough, right? We're in this kind of balance between like, what is the good? What is the enemy of the good? And, are we going to perfect? Are we trying to shoot for perfect? We should try, but we shouldn't like sacrifice the good for the sake of the perfect, right? So we're still going to make some progress here. Their patents will expire or, be totally indefensible in court. I think this one particularly, sound systems, beds, couches, soft furniture, etc. I think that qualifies as prior art. And if you got sued, it would not hold up. The problem being, can you afford a lawsuit?
Yeah.
Like psychedelics today can't really afford a lawsuit. So we stay out of things that, might shut the project down. So, right. Like therapists are not a pharma company. Pharma really outclasses therapists. So, is there a group organizing to say, hey, patent office, here's all your resources that you need around psychedelics. Here's what we think is, essentially open, as opposed to here's what's novel, like an infusion technology where you're delivering psilocybin with a benzo so you don't have to taper off meds. I think that's out there. I don't know whose company that is, but that's a really incredible thing. And that, I'm pretty fine with that being protected by patent for 7 years if the trade-off is that we get a ton of clinical data on it before it gets issued, to the open world. There's something there. Like the system is in place, probably for some corrupt reasons. But if we want to be optimists briefly, the idea is that in order for people to spend money to develop new technology and provide new data, because the feds aren't doing it, universities aren't really doing it. So individuals have to get together and do it. In corporations, unfortunately, that's just like the most appropriate vehicle if you don't want to just flush your money down the drain. They want to protect their investment. They're trying to make money, and they don't want to just, lose all that R&D money in the research. They want to protect it for at least a little bit of time. Like 7 years it's kind of fair. Like it feels like an asshole thing. Like I used to be very anti-IP. And, really mad at Lars Ulrich for coming after Napster, that kind of deal. And, there's the whole open source movement had a lot of really great critiques of software companies that were, like Microsoft, they very litigation heavy and they sold their software for a really extreme price. Whereas, a Linux system, people build it once and it's free for the whole world forever. I think that's one of the frustrating points. But there are limitations there by not having an income around that. There's no warranty around that software. There's no real support team to help you if you come into some problems. But typically that does come with closed source software companies, a la Microsoft. So there's benefits to open. There's benefits to closed. I don't know what to do here other than like, hey, Compass, not cool. Like we as the psychedelic culture don't appreciate that move. It's a really kind of a bummer to see that you've done that. And we wish you didn't. Like please patent actually novel things. Or if you're going to be patenting things, do it in a nonprofit that says it's open source. Like if you're afraid that MindMed's going to do it, why not just put it in like a little open source container to say all these patents are public domain? And you're less of a jerk. Holding hands, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know how you could even hold people accountable for that if a patent was filed and approved,
Right.
Doesn't make any
and
sense.
Bear Owsley, the guy that made all the acid for the dead, he's the one that really developed these hi-fi sound systems for LSD. And he made the LSD too. So, what are you doing? So yeah, I don't know. Like it's inflammatory, it's problematic. And there's another way to go about this. Like if individuals want to fight this, easy to make a group that just helps make resources for patent officers. It sounds complicated, but you call a couple patent officers, they're probably going to talk to you. You call a couple trademark lawyers, maybe they want to help. And then you can have a really cool project that helps defend this scenario.
Yeah, and I think for anybody interested to kind of go back into this topic, we did an episode a while ago with a lawyer named Michael who talked about, the benefits of like patents, IP, trademarks, and just kind of like the pros and cons there. We kind of explored that a little bit. I remember that was a few years ago, so it's not so fresh in my head.
September 11, 2018.
Yeah,
And
wow.
End of the Road, Mike End of the Road is the name of the podcast if people want to check that out.
Yeah.
So it's worth understanding. Like this is going to keep coming up. There's more and more companies coming. Us kind of psychedelic people aren't going to be able to just say, "Oh, I don't like patents," and have it stop. Like the world doesn't work like that. It'd be cool if it did, but it doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, I could think about like creating something super novel, new, and wanting to protect that to, if you dedicated a lot of time and energy towards like some sort of project like that, wouldn't you want to feel protected there? And I understand the benefit there of patents and filing things. But when it goes towards something that's been open for so long, like, using these certain techniques, and it just feels very general and it's not very like maybe new or novel. And I mean, I guess I probably wouldn't be complaining or just like having a negative perspective on it if they're just like, hey, we're creating a training program and it's going to be called this, and maybe we trademark it. That seems legit, right? Because you're using open techniques that have been used for a while. You're
More
just
comfortable.
organized. Yeah, more comfortable. Like you're just organizing it in a way to preserve the integrity of what you're trying to teach people under the roof of that trademark or name. But yeah, I just don't understand the patent thing. I'm not an IP lawyer or anything like that, so it's all new to me.
What part feels uncomfortable or like unclear to you?
I mean, just like understanding, like, how could you patent, I guess, like a process, like a therapy process like that? And could you say, like, you can't use that, we're going to come after you if you hold hands and do it in like this type of way? I mean, I get it from the trademark perspective, right? Like you're
No
like,
touching. Yeah.
well, for example, like we don't say that we offer holotropic breath work. I understand that because we didn't get trained in that. We went through Dream Shadow
Right.
transpersonal breath work, and that's to like honor that, hey, we didn't go through that program. We've been trained by Lenny Elizabeth, and similar technique, similar practice, a little bit different, maybe philosophically at times. And that's okay. Like I'm fine not saying like we facilitate holotropic breath work, right? So like, I don't like, if you ended up.
I think you're seeing like what feels human scale versus what feels alien, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like I guess like if somebody started up like a psychedelic clinic and they're just like using this type of format, and then say Compass filed this patent, they got approved, they found out somebody was using, soft furniture and, high res music, and they're like, oh, nope, you can't do that. I could see that if a clinic was saying, hey, like I'm using, this psychedelic training, that whatever a name would be, and they didn't get trained in that. And then I could see where that's a little bit different than just trying to patent these like open techniques. But again, I don't know if that's their
Right.
goal, right? Like, I don't know if they're really trying to crack down on that or hold that, or what their like end goal is.
Like something less common. Like how would we come up with something novel, just to like think about it? So like, well, this isn't even novel, but it's like it could be seen that way. So you have a scuba mask on, you're in a saltwater tank that's at body temperature, and you're getting a ketamine infusion while under supervision in there. And like that, sounds kind of novel and weird, but John Lilly's was doing that many decades ago. And, that not that weird. Like what would you have to do? I don't know. Like our patented technique of going in a Corvette at 180 miles an hour during your ketamine infusion while laying down, like that could be novel maybe, because people probably aren't doing that too regularly. And there's probably very minimal video or documentation of it. So like that, like I'm having a hard time coming up with like alien things like that, like a really new.
I was even wondering about like DMTX. Could there be certain parts of that could be patented? Maybe if they came up with like some sort of new technology of the infusion machine, would you be able? I mean, I think
It would
you
have
would
to be new
trademark
technology, right?
Yeah, I could see you trademarking the technique on like how to create that environment for somebody and have a patent on the
That would be
technology
a
and the
patent on the
device.
technique. That would be a
Yeah.
patent on the technique, but it would be a trademark on the name DMTX.
Right. Okay.
Gallimore and Strassman were the people that published on that. So it's like already in the scientific literature.
Right.
So it's like, are you able to just see a scientific paper and then patent those things? I don't think that's true. But you could say, this is our, you know, chamomile quartz crystal DMT infusion technology patent pending. You could say that. And that could be your trademark or patent. And, you have to have some novel technology. And the line is not obvious, right? Like if you want to trademark, it
Yeah.
has to be not obvious. So it's like, I'm going to trademark coffee to wake up in the morning. And it's like, that's very obvious. But if you want to like have a, 14 blend pill or like a Neon Mind, they got like 7 things in their coffee. Like that's patentable.
Right. Yeah, it's a product.
Right.
And processes, right?
The weird thing is they don't necessarily have to patent the ratios. They could, but
Just
they
the
don't necessarily
blend.
have to, I don't think.
Mm.
Right. I'd want to talk to a patent lawyer on that. But yeah, this morning I came really close to hitting up Mike to see if he had any comments on it. Because I think it's important to hear from a lawyer that's on our side about this, on the side of our
this
community.
clearly isn't my area of expertise in law,
Yeah.
legal jargon.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else on this one before we move to the next one?
No, I think that's about it. Yeah, again, if people want to learn a little bit more about like patents and stuff, you could check out that episode with Mike at End of the Road on our podcast, and we get into what is a patent, what can be patented, and et cetera, and how that plays a role in the psychedelic industry.
So the next one you found, Kyle, the School of Pharmacy at the University of Wisconsin-Madison just launched a master's in psychoactive pharmaceutical investigations.
Yeah, sounds pretty cool.
Do you notice anything there of note?
No, I just stumbled across this. I think somebody posted it on LinkedIn that I found this morning and thought it was pretty cool. So it's a transdisciplinary, first of its kind, psychoactive pharmaceutical investigation master's program. And it's just cool to see more of these kind of psychedelically oriented topics and degrees pop up at universities. I feel like that is really, I don't know, setting the stage that psychedelic science is here and is starting to integrate into academia a little bit. So excited to just see more things like this pop up.
Ran the math. It's about $46,500.
Expensive. Yeah, it's 15.
Takes 2 to 6 semesters.
Yeah. 31 graduate credits at $1,500 per credit. So yeah, I mean, obviously you get the nice bill with academia.
But what comes with that is you can probably get into pharma.
Yeah.
It's not going to automatically make you Sasha Shulgin or anything, but you're going to be able to do some really interesting research. And realistically, we need people everywhere. Like, as much as I would prefer people don't go work for Pfizer or whoever, like that's just going to be part of the game, right? Like we need people all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's really an all hands on deck scenario right now around this stuff.
Yeah. It sounds like their curriculum is going to connect chemistry and culture, equity and ethnobotany, phenomenology, and pharmacokinetics. Cool.
Well, I like that.
Yeah.
Wish I could afford it and had the free time. Maybe next time around. So there's a new nonprofit in Oregon. What are they calling this one? Healing Advocacy Fund.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's kind of a nonprofit that's hoping to steer the Oregon psilocybin legalization in the right direction. It looks like Sam Chapman, who chatted with a few times about Measure 109 in Oregon. Nice guy, by the way. Looks like he's steering that nonprofit. Should probably get him back on the show to talk about that.
Yeah.
Here's a quote. The continued education and dialogue throughout this implementation process is going to be critical to ensuring that we not only are we putting patient safety and facilitator training top of mind, but we're also ensuring that we're going to create the most affordable, acceptable, equitable program possible. Because if we can't do that, all of this was for nothing. Kind of true, kind of not true. Next quote here. It's not lost on us that there are many other states and other countries watching Oregon incredibly closely, right? Like Florida, Connecticut, Hawaii, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's a really weird liminal kind of situation we're in with Oregon, right? Like less than 2 years, this will be available in Oregon. And we don't know what it's going to look like. That's kind of a weird deal,
Yeah.
right? We don't know who's going to be on the advisory board for Oregon. We don't really know what their rules and regulations look like at all. Like we got a rough sketch with Measure 109, but there's a lot left to answer.
Yeah.
John Dennis, one of our past students, is working really closely with it. I think
Oh, awesome.
other than the Eckerts and Sam, like he's the one that knows it best probably. So maybe we'll have him on to talk about it.
I almost put an application in for the board.
Would have been awesome.
But I found out that they might be accepting out-of-state residents, like literally, like probably like 12 hours before the application was ending or something like that. I was like, I
Right.
don't know
That
if
would have been an all-night
I
project.
don't know if I'm doing that.
Yeah. So Governor of Oregon, if you're accepting verbal nominations, Kyle Buller, MS, MA, MS,
MS.
MS. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting project. I really hope Oregon does well with it because it really will, in a lot of ways, set the tone for other states and countries.
Yeah. As we're seeing, right? Florida and possibly Oregon.
What's interesting
Hawaii.
is I haven't seen any countries do it, really talk about it yet. So if you're a broke country and listening to psychedelics today, maybe this is a move. You can get more medical tourism dollars to your, unfortunately broke country. Yeah. So let's see where it goes. Anything more on that one, Kyle?
No. But I guess it was nice to see this nonprofit like education to help, inform the board. I imagine that the board will be, comprised of very well-established people in the field. But yeah, it'll be nice to see kind of like this nonprofit to help maybe educate those folks as well and hopefully create something together.
Yeah. So further on that line, Marijuana Moment article here from January 27th. So this is a little old. We might have talked about this already, but Hawaii could legalize psychedelic mushroom therapy under new Senate bill, which is pretty neat. Eating mushrooms in Hawaii has been a dream of mine for a while.
Hawaii is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to spend some time in Hawaii too, right? With like Kat Harrison and got to see
Kat Harrison.
ethnobotany training.
Yeah, it was little under 2 weeks maybe, and it was a class on ethnobotany, indigenous farming techniques, and like shamanism. So yeah, it was cool. We toured around the Big Island and learned about the local plant medicine around that area, and had discussions about psychoactive plants and psychedelics. And yeah, it was really cool. Learned how to make cordage out of some of the tea leaves there. It was a pretty wild experience.
So cordage, like
I'm
rope?
very grateful for it. Yeah, rope. Yep.
Cool.
And not like tea that you drink. I think it's one of the trees there. I think it's just called tea, like TI, tea leaves.
So this article says the measure, if approved, would direct the State Department of Health to establish designated treatment centers for the therapeutic administration of psilocybin and psilocin. Interesting. Two psychoactive substances produced by certain fungi. That's interesting. It would also remove 2 compounds from the state's list of Schedule 1 controlled substances and create a 7-person psilocybin review panel to assess the impacts of the policy change. Yeah, I think that's just government being careful, right? But makes sense. I guess we got to be careful these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're really kind of following like Oregon's steps there as well.
Now, next up here, bazinga.com. Don't really know what Bazinga is. Article title, Boston suburb votes to decriminalize natural psychedelics. Oh yeah, this is nice. So you got to pay to get the rest of the article, but essentially Cambridge,
I
Massachusetts.
think we might have covered it a little bit. Yeah.
I think we did, yeah. Just goofy to call it a suburb. It's like Boston's a weird one. Like Boston means like 30 towns, really.
Yep.
Boston proper is tiny. It's like a postage stamp. But yeah, decrum everything. Plant-based and fungi-based. Shortly following Somerville.
Yeah, so that's 2 Massachusetts town.
So it's they're right next to each other. Cambridge is where Harvard is. Somerville is where my father was born. Actually, I spent a lot of time there because I had a lot of friends living in Somerville for a bit. Yeah, it's just beautiful to see that. I bet Leah is part of that, which is pretty cool. Wouldn't be surprised. I haven't heard from her in a while, but it'd be cool if she was helping steer that.
Yeah, not too sure. I know she was in Costa Rica for a bit. Maybe she's back in the area.
Right.
Let us know what you're up to, Leo.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be great to hear from you. And let's see. What else is going on? There's so much. There's an interesting conversation on the Facebook group about why mescaline isn't more researched. Rick Doblin on the Field Trip podcast recently said that mescaline is one of the substances that really needs to be researched, and it really doesn't have much research happening. I saw a spoiler.
Did he give any statement why?
No, not really. Just there was a lot of activity before, and there's no activity now. It's like ignoring psilocybin. Like, why would we do that? It's been massively influential. And mescaline has been very influential. Like Mike J's book was extraordinary. Did you get a chance to read Mike J's Mescaline? I forget.
I got through about like half of it on Audible.
Yeah.
I haven't finished it yet.
He's kind of a spectacular book. It doesn't really say too much. It's just a very different class of molecule. Really, what's the primary phenethylamine being investigated right now is MDMA, right? So, like, I've heard rumors that 2CB is being investigated by some groups. So that would be cool. But, mescaline's kind of funny, right? Like, you have to take a lot of it. And there's some unfortunate side effects like nausea. Meaning to me, like, there's room for novel drug combinations there. Like, perhaps we could do like pairing it with an antiemetic, like stop you from throwing up and feeling uncomfortable. And then you can, ride out those experiences in a, more maybe clinically acceptable way. I don't know if that's the right phrasing there. Yeah. Like I haven't consumed mescaline yet. I don't really understand how that's possible, but
one day.
It's not for lack of wanting. Put it that way. Yeah, it's not available. It's expensive. You have to consume a lot of it. Like I talked to somebody recently and they said two like scoops like this, like putting your hands together of dried San Pedro powder is like a standard dose. And that's a lot. That's like a full cup.
Yeah.
Like 600 something milliliters or something. Like that's a lot. And, when LSD and psilocybin, you're doing milligrams or micrograms. 2CB, like 22 milligrams is pretty decent. And like, do you really want to be doing hundreds of milligrams, like close to, I don't know, like close to many grams of this? Like there seems to be something goofy there.
Well, what about like pure mescaline?
I think the dosages are still pretty big. I don't know what that, let me pull it up. So there was a thing in the Mike J book about microdots of mescaline being a big topic in the past, and it's not really a thing. So like the dosage required is pretty massive. So here's the dosages according to Psychonaut Wiki. So I was a little off, but threshold dose of 50 milligrams, which is maybe like 5 times that of 2CB. So a light dose is 100 to 200 milligrams, common 200 to 400 milligrams. So, you're talking like pretty substantial, but, still manageable, right? Like I'm eating 2000 milligrams of vitamin C, possibly like multiple times a day. So not a big deal, really. The pill wouldn't be that big, especially if it's pure isolate or synthetic or something. So, I guess another part of it is it's really long, like upwards of 14 hours. And psilocybin just seems more practical for a lot of purposes for people, especially in kind of commercial.
Yeah, I think clinically speaking, any of those substances that, are much longer acting is just like more resources, right? So when you look at LSD, it's just more resources on the clinical end. And I mean, it'd be interesting if that became, investigated more and could see more clinical application. But I assume that's probably why having shorter acting substances and effects, it seems more ideal for that clinical use.
Right. Right. We assume like, because there's not much clinical data, we kind of assume it would be helpful for people. And the reason we assume that is because there's a pretty long history of use of peyote, San Pedro, and other mescaline-containing plants and cacti.
Hmm.
So, yeah. And, there's rumors in the underground, but we don't really have like great clinical data we can point to. At the very least, it seems fun. So, and here's a line here from Psychonaut Wiki. Synthetic mescaline is highly sought after and is typically produced in limited batches for connoisseurs, owing to its low potency and relatively high production cost. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the thread on our Facebook group kind of got into that a little bit. Like, why is this the case? One guy was talking about a known name in the psychedelic field was talking about selling lots of peyote in Canada. No real regard for like the overall situation with peyote, which is a little touchy. We still really need to get the peyote conservation people on to talk to them about that, because it's like a really important topic, I think. Yeah. So really, if you can get synthetic, great. They sell San Pedro at all sorts of places. It's pretty much very legal to own. It's all over Phoenix, in people's yards. They don't even know what it is. I was told, I don't know if this is verified or not, that San Pedro cactus sold at like a place like Home Depot has a good portion of that potency bred out of it. I don't like, that seems a little goofy to me, more like folklore, but there's a chance, right?
Yeah, it might be. I'm not too sure. I never heard that before.
Right. Yeah. That came from somebody who like grows it on their own. Yeah.
Interesting. I think you wanted to touch on a topic about, I guess, just drugs in general. You said before we got recorded here, you had some like things that you wanted to explore.
So yeah, I posted about this in the Facebook group a little bit. Leveraging Emmanuel Sferios's kind of podcast name, Drug Positive. Like, I'm trying to be really drug positive and issue as little shame as possible around this stuff, and in fact encourage intelligent integration of this into your world. So, Carl Hart's book, Drug Use for Grown-Ups, really important book. We just kind of wrapped our giveaway for that recently. And if people haven't read that, they really need to. It's fucking earth shattering.
I'm about halfway through it, and it's got me thinking a lot about different things. And I think the chapter that I'm ending on is he's kind of critiquing the term harm reduction. And I thought that was really interesting.
Health and happiness.
Yeah, health and happiness.
And, he quoted some really interesting people in there. I think he quoted Aleister Crowley. I think he quoted McKenna a few times. And it's like, if this stuff, if the Constitution, Bill of Rights, et cetera, doesn't allow us to consume, what we want when we want safely for our health and happiness, in the pursuit of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that kind of deal, then it's not worth the hemp it was written on. And horrible paraphrase of Terence McKenna's line there, but something along those lines. And I'm reflecting because Carl Hart's a pretty important psychologist at Columbia, past chair of psychology at Columbia. And I hearkened back to earlier today, this time when I was in the ICU. Like, I had a really bad mountain bike accident, kidney laceration, the works, like really bad rib injuries. And they had me on a drip of Dilaudid, which is a really powerful opiate.
Yeah.
And I wasn't on it all the time, but I really liked it. So, I can see how it's seductive. I can see how that if you have like a really bad trauma history, it can become really problematic. But prohibition is the reason that we have all these drug harms. Yeah. And it's, before the drug war started, drugs were everywhere.
Right.
And they weren't even called drugs, right? They were just like things you could buy at the pharmacy or whatever, the druggist, apothecary, etc. You could buy like cocaine drinks, heroin drinks, like everything was available. Nothing was really illegal, right? Like mescaline was all over, hashish, like cannabis, all over the place. We've got a really long history of poly drug use in the Western world, and prohibition kind of swept it under the rug. Alcohol prohibition, drug prohibition. only caffeine and alcohol are acceptable now, and tobacco, obviously, nothing else. So, some of our best artists in the world had lots of this stuff, like William Blake,
Yeah.
Yeats, like mescaline was a big deal there. And then, so what brought this to the foreground for me was I didn't watch it and I need to, but the halftime show at the Super Bowl recently on the Facebook group, I think I called it the World Super Cup or something, just to kind of minimize it. So I think, professional sports like that are a little problematic, brain damage and whatnot. But they had The Weeknd, Canadian performer, run the halftime show. And I thought it was novel at the time. Like, oh, cool. Like, massive drug user in terms of his lyrics, at least in his songs. Like, definitely a lot of cocaine, a lot of benzos, like a lot of other weird stuff. And I was like, oh, that's really neat. They have a black man on stage, probably including lyrics about drugs on stage to, one of the biggest television events, at least in America, once a year. I thought that was a big deal in terms of like shifting drug dialogue. And then, as I'm speaking, I'm like, well, Michael Jackson died from drugs. Prince died from drugs. Like there were, predecessors who were pretty forward. No, I guess they weren't really forward. Like MJ and Prince weren't really that forward about their drug stuff, but Weeknd was, and is.
I don't know too much
So
about Weeknd and his history there.
Well, I can't feel my face when I'm with you. Like literal drug, like cocaine song. And then there's, plenty of others. You just listen to the lyrics when you pop on like This Is the Weekend or something on your Spotify or something, and just kind of like check it out. It's like, oh, this is really weird. So the commentary on the Facebook group was like, he's not very psychedelic. This other rapper is a lot more psychedelic. It's like, well, that's not my point here. I'm saying like, are we in a little bit of a fantasy land when we're trying to separate ourselves from the rest of drug culture? Big portions of psychedelic culture overlap with other portions of other drug cultures. And we're not mutually exclusive. We're prosecuted and surveilled by the same government agencies. Prohibition hits us all really hard, like that Albert Hoffman fentanyl blotter that you bring up quite regularly. Like, you think your acid's great and it's, this is family fluff acid, man, on Albert Hoffman blotter, but it's actually fentanyl. Like the drug dealer doesn't necessarily have to know what it is to sell it to you, right? They just have it and sell it to you. And people can die. So prohibition affects us all. Imagine what prohibition does to all of us. Like puts us, like what we saw in Jamaica where there wasn't mushroom prohibition. It was a little more relaxed. Like there wasn't that government fear. Like the feds aren't going to come pop you or the local police aren't going to give you a hard time or arrest you. Mm-hmm. Versus here, it's a little complicated. And like my experience with mushrooms in Denver was a really different deal. Like I was more comfortable after decriminalization went through holding on to and consuming mushrooms in Denver. And that's a big deal. It's something to notice. And what does it do with people who use other drugs? Way worse things. Crack, cocaine. Well, crack, like the sentencing disparity between crack and cocaine is extraordinary, totally unfair. Like what was the figure? Like, we'll stab at it. Like Obama brought down the disparity quite a bit, but it was still like 80-1 or something like that.
I forget. Yeah.
People can just walk from cocaine because they're rich white people largely. If you got crack, it's a very different deal. You could be doing like mandatory minimums of like 10 plus years for simple possession.
Yeah.
And this isn't even like a partisan issue, right? Like the Democrats in New York were putting so many people away for years. Like the drug war was a great issue for them because it kept them in power. And, I think that's how a lot of politicians win votes is by being quote unquote tough on drugs when, we should be tough on the drug war.
Yeah.
I remember Bob Jesse at Horizons a few years ago, like saying, well, we should still see these drugs as different. Yes, sure. We should be able to see the differences between drugs, totally. But prohibition is unfair to everybody. It harms our movement. It harms other cultures as well. Drug war is wildly racist. And to ignore that might just be a political goal to like say, oh, our drugs are different. Therefore, we're cooler than them, safer than them, and better than them. But are you? Like, I know psychedelic people that are, not worth their weight in sand relative to Carl Hart, who's worth his weight in gold. And what are we really saying? Are we saying something meaningful? And I don't think we are when we're trying to make differences, especially around drug policy.
Yeah.
So I'm leaning on this really drug positive track of eliminating the drug war as soon as possible. Also, yes, medicalize. So I recorded with JR from MindMed a while back, and I don't know yet if I'm going to want to release that episode. And we got into like a 20, 30 minute weird circular debate around the drug war versus medicalization. And I could have done a better job in that argument, but he kept saying like, well, people that are sick should get treatment first. It's like, I don't think it's an either or. Like, what does it really cost to end the drug war? What do we save by ending the drug war? It's probably actually better for culture to end the drug war than to medicalize psychedelics. It's going to be cheaper. Yeah. We're going to have a lot of our citizenry back. We're going to have less felons. We're going to have a lot more people back. Much less racist culture. Yeah. All that. So it's, I know this is psychedelics today, and I once in a while I feel like I'm going to go, and this is drug war today. But it's like, it's just a thing that keeps coming back to me. And I think it's important that we examine our cultural baggage around, our traditions. Like, should we really be demonizing people who use PCP? I don't think so. Like, drugs have cultural baggage and momentum of their own, cultural inertia of their own that we don't get to see because we're, white guy living in Jersey or Colorado. If we were living on, predominantly black neighborhood in Philly, we'd have a really different perspective on drugs.
Really different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, like going through Carl Hart's book recently, I was actually thinking about it the other day about my path, I guess, like towards becoming interested in psychedelics. And I actually remember in high school, I became super passionate about the drug war. And I did not use any substances in high school. Didn't touch alcohol besides once before I had my accident. My accident really kind of woke me up and made me not want to touch drugs. But I had a lot of friends that did. They were drinking, they were smoking pot, and I had friends do other stuff that I guess I didn't really know about until later on. But I was always really passionate about ending the drug war because I guess I just went down some rabbit holes and just realized it's causing a lot of harm, and it's a waste of money, the taxpayers' money. And, what could society look like if we didn't like put so much time and energy towards this? And I realized like I had such a passion towards that. And that's really, I think, where my interest started, was this weird kind of fascination about wanting to end the drug war back then. And this was before, again, I didn't use any substances back then, but I just realized the harm of the actual drug war. And, I'm just thinking that the drug war has impacted my life in so many different ways outside of psychedelics. I have friends that were arrested for marijuana possession or cannabis possession, couldn't get student loans, really changed the trajectory of their life. Really smart people. I have...
Not to mention the people who died, right?
Well, and that's the other thing I was going to say, like literally like this kind of friend group. It was like my good friend that I grew up with, like their whole kind of friend group, and they all kind of mixed and mingled. I think there's only like a few of them left. It's really, really sad. Like a lot of people from my town have died from heroin overdoses. And, going to all those, I don't know how many funerals I've been to for overdoses, and to say like, it's affecting communities elsewhere. And that's really hard to just see friend after friend like pass from that. And just the impact that it has on like, the people around. Like, it's just, you go, when am I going to get that call that so-and-so died? And it's, and some of these people, like I wasn't really friends with, they're just in this group that like, then I was friends with somebody from just growing up, and, they all went their different paths, and that was the path that they chose. But, what would it be like if they were able to get their substances tested? I think most of them probably died from like fentanyl overdoses. 2 of them died within the same week, and probably from the same batch, which was really messed up. And somebody else was just getting out of rehab, and I guess, just went back. And, so it's like, Yeah, I think about that whole group of people that passed and said, man, like if there was just drug testing, if they were able to just know what they were taking, if they had, good drug education about like tolerance and maybe not, using this much, really knowing your dose and having a lot of that education to make better decisions, would they still be alive right now?
Mm-hmm.
And how has that affected the community around here of all these like young people dying from overdoses? I don't it's really messed up when I think about it. Of like all the most of the funerals I've been to were drug overdoses. There's maybe somebody that died from like an accident, but I mean, it's kind of messed up to go to so many funerals at this young of an age, all drug related. And so I think we could sit there and say, yes, psychedelics, but also really thinking about the impact that, the drug war is causing on communities elsewhere. It's really
Mm-hmm.
important to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, shame from addiction,
Yeah.
like marry that with the drug war, and you've got a really lethal combo. A good follow up to the Carl Hart book, Drug Use for Grown-Ups, is Chasing the Scream, kind of that profile of Harry Anslinger. And it's tragic, right? Like, not only can we have a safer psychedelic culture, but we could have a safer world in general.
Yeah.
We're not going to cure, people are curious about drugs. You're never going to cure that. You're never going to stop that. People are always going to be curious about drugs.
Yeah.
People are hardwired to get high.
Yep.
And, we're not hardwired to not get high. Like, I thankfully have shifted away from drinking beers to drinking more coffee, but kind of debatable what's better for me, right? Like, I don't know, especially the way I consume it. Like, because it's, it's not just drug, right? It's like drug, dose, setting, route of administration.
Yeah.
Purity is a big part. Like, if you can get your drugs tested, that's a great first step, right? Safe supply is even better. Like, barely any overdose deaths or needle-borne blood infections in Switzerland, because it's government heroin. It's lab-grade pharma heroin, and people aren't dying. Compared to here, that's a fucking totally different world. When you take somebody's prescription away, nope, you can't have these oxys anymore because I think you're addicted and I might get sued or lose my license. You go right to heroin because you don't want to get dope sick and you still like the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's tragic. Those people were safe and not dying on opiates for the most part. Like, some people do overdose. But again, it comes down to education and doctors not being able, based on licensure, insurance, etc., to have frank, honest, open conversations with their clientele. Like, I can't even tell my fucking doctor that I eat edibles, cannabis edibles. Like, he gives me a ton of shit. So I'm like, all right, I'm just like not going to go to that doctor anymore.
Really?
It's been like 2-3 years.
Even with like legalization in Colorado for X amount of years, like that still hasn't changed?
It's a Catholic church-owned hospital network.
Okay. Yeah.
So they don't even like giving birth control out. So I'm like,
Weird.
wait, guys, you're in a very, very, very left-leaning, rich Colorado town in the mountains, and you're not going to give out birth control unless the women lie to you about why they need birth control because their cramps are too painful. You're fucking kidding me? So, when I get frustrated about doctors, there's reasons. Like, I'm not just griping like, oh, I can't get the Ambien I want. It's like, no, it's like people aren't able to get the services they want or need and deserve and, should have a right to, in my opinion.
Pursuit of happiness, right?
Right. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
We had that whole conversation with Lenny, how very subjective that is, right? Versus what was the other, like, life, liberty, and property? Was from,
I think it was a last minute change. It was either like Jefferson or Adams or something. Yeah. It's fascinating, right? So where do we go from here? I don't know. I would love for more people to read that book. I've kind of been militantly pushing it. We did that whole giveaway. Psychedelics Today paid for that whole giveaway. We didn't get any help from the publisher. I believe in the book that much. I believe in Carl Hart that much. I would love to get him on the show. Finally got his publicity team contact info. So maybe that'll happen. Maybe not. Would love it if we could get him on. Because this idea of psychedelic exceptionalism has been coming up a ton lately. It's a really big deal. And it's a great way to other people. Like, let me other you. because our culture is so far superior to yours. Is it really? Like, look how much infighting is happening in the psychedelic world right now. It's gross. It's really
Lots.
not.
Yeah.
It's not polite. It's really aggressive and mean and angry. These are the kind of things we want to avoid. Really. Like, how can we have nice, productive, heartfelt conversations with each other instead of just sniping at each other on the internet?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why that app Clubhouse is getting a lot of play. It's higher bandwidth than text and Facebook.
I haven't
right?
joined. I don't have
We have to buy Apple devices apparently to get on there.
I was going to say, should we get like Apple work phones? Or
I guess.
I've been invited so many times to it, and people want to interview us on there, and it's just like,
it's pretty cool.
I guess I should get an iPhone. Sorry, I'm an Android.
Maybe I can borrow somebody's iPad or something. Yeah, it's only because we don't have all that rich Apple money. Everybody, sorry. If we were rich, we could afford Apple.
No, I just always was Android Google, and it's hard to make that switch.
Oh, true. I've got endless critiques of Apple, so endless critiques of Google as well. There's all these new privacy phone options. I had somebody, you and I have a friend who's been getting hacked a lot. And I was like, okay, you need to buy this Linux laptop that barely anybody knows how to hack. And then these super privacy, like Android phones that are like totally scrubbed of anything Google related for the most part. Those two things together should be fine. You're probably not getting hacked anymore on that. Yeah. I'm interested in doing some more privacy podcasts, by the way. I want to get some like kind of dark web people to come talk about crypto and privacy and all this.
Yeah, a friend of mine just sent me a referral to a new app program built on the blockchain. I guess if you give them like $100 and you get like their tokens, they give you free VPN, but they tell you like if your passwords or usernames have ever been used on the dark web. And I haven't explored it much, but looks pretty interesting just for privacy related stuff. And it's oriented towards the blockchain.
That's a service a lot of groups offer. Like some of the credit monitoring companies do that. Like Credit Karma sent me some emails recently about 40 of my accounts that were exposed.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah. And the VPN thing, it's complicated, right? We've got to figure it out. We've got a long way to go here on internet culture. Who was I chatting with the other day? I think Molly, our copywriter that runs that Tactical Magic podcast. Something about like, all said and done, we're kind of doing okay here as humans because we're really just monkeys carrying around briefcases.
Yeah.
Like things are looking pretty bad and grim and we could do better. But all things said and done, not that bad given our genetic inheritance.
And I don't know if I was listening to something, watching something, or it was a conversation, but yeah, doing like pretty well. Also, when we think about the technology and the boom in technology and trying to keep up with it, like I think with all this stuff and we're just trying and we're just bombarded with like this new way of like living all of a sudden, it's really hard to keep up and just think about it. I mean, our brains really haven't adapted, I think from like an evolutionary standpoint to like be dealing with some of this new technology. I mean, it's crazy. And I think we're just trying
too
our
much
best
input.
that, okay, it's here.
Not enough rest.
Yeah, it's here now. Yeah, so stuff to consider.
I think that's why I like people like Dave Asprey and Ben Greenfield a bit. Like they talk about that. So it's like you can do this high level of intensity, but you need this rest period. And you can assist, technology assisted rest. But, you're going to get sick if you stay up here all the time. Sick in a lot of different ways. Power dynamics, too much input, too much, sensory load, toxins from weird food, like is our diet optimal or is it just kind of accidental because this is now our industrial waste, so we eat these things,
right?
Like what's optimal, let's be working towards the direction of optimal. Like it's going to be kind of this sine wave, like hopefully getting closer and closer to that thing. But now we also have to balance ecology. Like maybe X is great for you, but it does like a tremendous amount of harm to the planet. So like how do you balance that? Don't shit where you sleep, to the best of your ability. That's It's probably good enough for now, Kyle. We're a little over an hour.
We're an hour. I gotta get rolling.
That's quite the rant party. All right. So again, navigating psychedelics for clinicians and therapists. Few seats left. Check it out at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. We got that student edition coming up in a few weeks. Early March there. Ketamine trainings coming up. Film screening of Light Years. Same day as this podcast comes out. And got some really exciting religious work and legal work coming through.
Cool.
So a lot of really fun stuff for you all. And I can't wait to get it out there. Did I miss anything, Kyle?
I think that's it. There might be some things, but yeah, that sounded pretty good on my part.
There's always more projects.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.